When someone treats you poorly, your first instinct might be to justify it, blaming stress, insecurity, or saying, "That's just how they are." But Stoic philosophy teaches a hard truth. You can't control others, but you can control what you tolerate. And in relationships, what you tolerate becomes the norm. The more you excuse toxic behavior, the more you betray your peace. In this video, we'll break down 12 toxic behaviors you should never accept in a relationship. Rooted in Stoic wisdom. These aren't just obvious red flags like manipulation or emotional instability. Some are subtle, disguised as love, care, or concern. But in reality, they chip away at your self-worth and keep you emotionally hostage. As Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This isn't about blaming others. It's about reclaiming your clarity. If you've ever felt emotionally drained, confused, or like you're shrinking to keep someone else happy, this video is for you. And if you're ready to draw the line and protect your peace, hit like and subscribe for more Stoic wisdom on relationships, boundaries, and emotional strength. Let's begin.
Number 1.
Emotional manipulation. It often starts quietly. A soft guilt trip here, a flattering compliment there. Words that seem harmless on the surface but are designed to shift your emotions, confuse your judgment, and make you question yourself. Emotional manipulation is not always loud or violent. Sometimes it wears the mask of intimacy. "If you really loved me, you'd do this. I guess I'm just not important to you anymore." These phrases aren't expressions of vulnerability. They're tools of control, tools meant to pull your strings and make your emotions dance for their benefit. The Stoics taught that clarity of mind is freedom. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." In the same way, emotional manipulation only works when it entangles your mind, when your peace becomes dependent on another's approval or guilt trips. The manipulator wants you to abandon your reason and surrender to their emotional chaos. But Stoicism reminds us, your emotions are not public property. They are your sacred domain. Let's be clear, this kind of manipulation doesn't thrive in healthy relationships. It thrives in power imbalances. It's about control, not connection. It's about someone using your empathy against you, twisting your desire to be a good partner into a tool for their own comfort and dominance. The danger lies not just in the words they use, but in the slow erosion of your ability to say no without guilt, to disagree without fear, to assert your truth without being punished emotionally for it. Now consider Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who navigated a world of politics, betrayal, and pressure. Despite it all, he wrote to himself, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." What does this mean in relationships? It means you don't respond to emotional games with more emotional games. You step back, you observe, you choose not to react from woundedness. Instead, you respond from principle. You become the stillness that cannot be baited. If someone uses guilt or flattery to get what they want, you don't owe them an argument. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself the dignity of naming the manipulation out loud and refusing to participate. That's not cold. That's clarity. And if you do not define the boundary, manipulation will. In fact, the Stoic path is not about cutting off emotion. It's about refining it. It's about distinguishing between what you feel and what you must act on. You may feel bad for saying no, but feeling bad isn't the same as being wrong. Manipulation thrives in the space between your empathy and your boundaries. That's why you must close the gap. And the only way to do that is to see clearly, to name what's happening, and to act not from guilt, but from grounded self-respect. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." And emotional manipulation is a subtle form of adversity. It challenges your integrity, tests your ability to hold your center while being pulled in every direction, but in resisting it, in standing firm, you prove something vital, not just to them, but to yourself. So the next time someone says, if you really cared, you would pause, breathe, ask yourself, is this request coming from love or from control disguised as need? That pause, that moment of stillness, is where your power begins. In the end, emotional manipulation is a violation of your inner sovereignty. And the only way to defend your peace is to protect it with fierce clarity. That's what Stoicism gives you. Not just the strength to say no, but the calm to mean it. Remember, love that demands your obedience is not love, it's control, and you were not born to be controlled.
Number 2.
So they sorted the silent treatment. Silence can be golden, but when used as a weapon, it becomes emotional warfare, covert, cruel, and confusing. The silent treatment isn't about peace, it's about punishment. It's a calculated withdrawal meant to create insecurity, provoke guilt, and force submission. It says, I will withhold love, words, and presence until you bend. And what makes it dangerous is that it mimics emotional self-control while secretly breeding chaos in the mind of the person being punished. The Stoics valued silence, but not this kind. They spoke of silence as stillness, not as strategy. Marcus Aurelius reflected, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. The silent treatment, on the other hand, is passive aggression disguised as virtue. It looks composed on the outside, but on the inside, it's manipulation through emotional starvation. And here's the catch. It often makes the recipient blame themselves, scrambling for reconciliation, even when they did nothing wrong. This tactic turns your mind into a battlefield. You start overthinking every word, rereading past conversations, trying to decode why they've gone quiet. Your self-worth becomes dependent on breaking that silence. You begin apologizing not out of conviction, but out of fear. Fear of being abandoned, misunderstood, or unloved. That's how this behavior steals your power. Not through shouting, but through absence. Seneca taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The silent treatment amplifies this. It creates mental noise where there should be peace. It plants doubt where there should be dialogue. And slowly it trains you to equate silence with danger, with withdrawal of love, with rejection. This is not how mature, grounded individuals handle conflict. This is how emotional bullies operate, without words but with maximum damage. Now look at how someone like Viktor Frankl responded to suffering. Though not a Stoic by title, his mindset embodied it. In the worst conditions imaginable, he discovered that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. When someone gives you the silent treatment, they are trying to take that freedom, to control your emotional state by shutting down communication. Your job is to reclaim it. That means recognizing the tactic for what it is. Don't chase, don't beg, don't internalize their silence as your fault. Instead, return to what is true. Have you done wrong? If so, apologize sincerely. If not, stand still and allow their silence to be their own burden, not yours. Refuse to let their emotional immaturity define your inner world. Stoicism teaches detachment, but not disconnection. If someone you love is hurting and needs space, give it with grace. But if someone is punishing you with silence, that's not space. It's a power play. And the right response is not to collapse. It is to stay calm, stay kind, and stay rooted in truth. Too often, people confuse absence with wisdom, but the Stoics remind us that real wisdom is active. It seeks understanding, not avoidance. Silence, when used to punish, is a form of cowardice. It avoids responsibility, it delays resolution, and it keeps both people stuck in emotional limbo. So the next time someone gives you the cold shoulder without explanation, ask yourself, is this love or is this control masquerading as composure? That question will bring you clarity, and with clarity comes peace. Because in the end, you don't need to raise your voice to rise above manipulation. You just need to stop participating in the game. The Stoic stands in silence, but never as a tool of harm, only as a mirror of inner strength. The difference is intention, and intention, when it comes to silence, reveals everything.
Number 3.
Constant criticism. There's a kind of criticism that sharpens you, the kind that comes from someone who sees your potential and speaks with truth, patience, and care. But constant criticism, the kind that never uplifts, never pauses, never allows room for grace, is not about growth, it's about control. It's about making you feel small so someone else can feel big. When every effort you make is met with not good enough, when your smallest flaws are spotlighted while your strengths go unnoticed, you're not in a relationship, you're under surveillance. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to doubt yourself. You apologize for things that aren't wrong. You shrink your dreams to avoid more critique. You start living for approval, not for purpose. And in doing so, you lose the most precious thing you have, your inner freedom. The Stoics taught us to accept feedback with humility, but they also taught us to be vigilant against false judgment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake, or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. It's the truth I'm after." See, he welcomed correction. But there's a difference between correction and corrosion. Correction builds, corrosion breaks. One is rooted in love, the other in ego. One expands you, the other shrinks you. And here's the hidden danger of constant criticism. It becomes your inner voice. After enough exposure, you internalize the critic. You start policing your own spirit, doubting your value even when no one's watching. That's the real cost. Not just the pain of hearing it, but the prison of believing it. This is why Stoicism is so vital, because it reminds you that the only judgments that matter are those rooted in reason, not resentment. Seneca said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." Constant criticism thrives in that imagination. It tells you you're always wrong, always lacking, always broken. But what if you're not? What if the critic is not a mirror, but a mask? Let's consider Eleanor Roosevelt, not a Stoic by label, but certainly by character. She once said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Her life was full of public scrutiny, yet she carried herself with poise, clarity, and direction. Because she understood that self-respect is not granted by others. It's protected by boundaries. And that protection is not passive. It requires vigilance. It requires the courage to say, "I will not absorb this anymore." And boundaries are what constant critics hate most. When you start saying, "That's enough," they get louder. When you start succeeding without their input, they feel threatened, because their criticism was never about helping you. It was about containing you. But your peace is not a bargaining chip. It is not up for negotiation. So how do you deal with this? You listen, but you don't absorb. You reflect, but you don't collapse. You ask yourself, is this feedback helping me grow or keeping me small? If it's truth, welcome it. If it's just noise, let it pass like wind through an open window. You don't fight the wind, you let it pass. The Stoic path is not about becoming deaf to others. It's about learning how to filter, to take what's useful and discard what's corrosive. Because at the end of the day, constant criticism is not a reflection of you. It's a mirror of their own unrest, their own unhealed wounds projected onto you. So when someone keeps tearing you down under the mask of honesty, Remember this. Real love speaks with intention, not irritation, and real strength listens without surrendering. You are here to be present, to improve, and to protect your peace. Anything that doesn't serve that is not worth entertaining. And anyone who cannot see your worth without first diminishing it is not offering love. They're offering control dressed as concern.
Number 4.
Control disguised as love. At first it seems flattering. The way they always want to know where you are, how they check in constantly, how they get jealous easily. I just care about you, they say. It's because I love you so much. But soon the questions become interrogations. The concern becomes surveillance, and the love becomes a leash. Control disguised as love is one of the most dangerous emotional traps because it doesn't wear the face of cruelty. It wears the face of devotion. You feel like you're being protected, but really you're being monitored. What begins as closeness turns into captivity. Stoicism teaches us that love must come with freedom. Epictetus said, "He who is free is the one who lives as he wishes, neither compelled, nor hindered, nor forced." In a truly loving relationship, you are not micromanaged, you are trusted, you are not corrected, you are accepted, you are not confined. You are chosen again and again, freely. But a controlling partner wants possession, not partnership. They may call it love, but it's about power. Power over your choices, your schedule, even your inner world. And over time, you begin to doubt your own autonomy. You stop texting friends. You hesitate before harmless decisions. That hesitation is where freedom dies. Let's look at someone like Maya Angelou, a poet, thinker, and force of inner clarity. She once said, "Love liberates, it doesn't bind." That truth cuts to the heart of this issue. Any relationship that asks you to shrink, hide, or abandon yourself in order to maintain peace, that's not peace. That's control dressed up as connection. Control hides behind caring words, but without respect, they become tools of domination. You start feeling watched and judged by the very person who should bring peace. That's why Stoicism insists on internal sovereignty. You must own your judgments and responses. When those are handed over, even with good intentions, you lose your center, Marcus Aurelius warned us. The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. And if you're always thinking about how to please, appease, or avoid setting someone off, you're not thinking freely, you're thinking under pressure. There's a reason why possessive love never leads to joy. It offers intensity, not stability, attention, not acceptance. It leaves both people empty, the controller drained by fear, the controlled robbed of dignity. So pause and ask yourself, am I being loved or managed, protected or restricted, seen or shaped? Only by seeing clearly can you live freely. The danger is that it's easy to confuse control with care, especially when wrapped in concern or affection. But Stoicism teaches you to see beyond the surface, to examine the motive, not just the behavior. A partner who asks, "Who are you going with?" out of insecurity is very different from one who asks out of genuine interest. And it's your responsibility to discern the difference. Seneca reminds us, a good character, when established, is not easily overthrown. But controlled tactics chip away at that character by training you to outsource your judgment. So how do you respond? First, don't confuse possessiveness with passion. One is about insecurity, the other is about connection. Second, name the behavior. Call it what it is, not to start a fight, but to restore clarity. Say, this constant checking in feels more like control than love. If they listen, there's hope. If they react with guilt or denial, it's a pattern, not a moment. And finally, set the boundary. Love without freedom is not love, it's fear. You weren't made to live under a microscope, but in alignment with your truth and your voice. If someone claims to love you but tries to control how you live, who you see, or what you think, they don't want love. They want ownership. The Stoic chooses clarity over confusion, and in a world full of disguised intentions, that clarity becomes your protection.
Number 5.
Emotional instability. Some days they're warm, loving, and generous. Other days cold, distant, or explosive. Without warning, without explanation. You never know which version of them you're going to meet, and so you begin to adapt, not out of love, but out of survival. This is the emotional roller coaster of instability, where you trade peace for the illusion of connection. At first, you think it's just mood swings. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe it's your fault. But soon your nervous system becomes conditioned. You start scanning their tone, their face, their silences, trying to predict storms before they come. You become the manager of their emotions, and in doing so, you abandon your own. The Stoics warned us of this trap. Epictetus wrote, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master." But it's not just about anger. It's about emotional unpredictability. When someone's moods dominate the atmosphere of your life, they become your compass. You live to regulate them instead of honoring your own clarity. And here's where it becomes toxic. When you're constantly walking on eggshells, your sense of identity starts to dissolve. You edit your words, you hide your feelings, you avoid honest conversations just to keep the peace. But that peace is not peace, it's fear dressed up in politeness. Let's take a lesson from Carl Jung, whose depth psychology overlaps Stoicism in powerful ways. Jung believed that when a person refuses to integrate their emotional shadow, they unconsciously project it onto others. And that's exactly what unstable partners do. They refuse to manage their inner storms, so they unleash them onto the people closest to them. But you were never meant to be someone's emotional dumping ground. True love is stable, not perfect, but steady. It creates a sense of safety, not suspense. And the Stoics knew this. Seneca said, "A mind that is anxious about future events is miserable." Now imagine living beside someone whose mood is the event. Every day that anxiety becomes your environment. What's worse, emotional instability often gets rationalized. That's just how they are. They're just passionate. But passion without discipline is chaos. And when chaos rules a relationship, the calm person always ends up paying the price. So what's the Stoic response? First, you recognize what's happening. You name it, not to label them, but to liberate yourself. Second, you stop personalizing their moods. Their unpredictability is not your responsibility. You are not the regulator of someone else's nervous system. Then you establish emotional boundaries. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop collapsing. You can hold compassion and distance at the same time. As Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." When someone brings volatility, you bring stability, not for them, but for yourself. Real-world wisdom confirms this. Oprah Winfrey, who grew up in emotional chaos, built her life around emotional clarity. She once said, "You cannot live a brave life without disappointing some people. And sometimes the ones you disappoint are those who expect you to absorb their storms without complaint." So the next time someone says, "You never know how I'm going to be," remember, that's not mystery, that's volatility, and love should not feel like roulette. The Stoic path is grounded in consistency, reflection, and choice. You do not need to scream, beg, or argue. You simply need to step out of the storm and return to your center. Their mood is not your mission. Your peace is not their playground. Because in the end, emotional instability isn't just hard to live with. It's dangerous to normalize. And your soul was not built to live in suspense. It was built to live in truth. Number 6, the blame game. When something goes wrong, they never look inward. It's always you, always the world, always someone else's fault. This is the hallmark of a person trapped in the blame game, a cycle where accountability is avoided and responsibility is deflected. And if you stay long enough, you'll begin to absorb that blame, even when it was never yours to carry. At first, it seems like small complaints. You made me late. You stressed me out. But over time, the message becomes louder. I'm unhappy, and it's because of you. Slowly, subtly, they rewrite the story so that your presence becomes the explanation for their failures. And if you're not careful, you'll start to believe it. The Stoics were clear about responsibility. Epictetus taught that we are responsible for some things and not for others. And the greatest suffering comes from confusing the two. When someone consistently blames you for things outside your control, their mood, their past, their choices, they are projecting, not reflecting. Blame is the ego's way of avoiding growth. It shields the person from discomfort, but at the cost of truth. Because if everything is someone else's fault, then there's no need to change. But change is the core of Stoic living. Marcus Aurelius, faced with pressures most of us can't imagine, wrote, "Let each thing you would do, say, or intend be like that of a dying person." What did he mean? That life is too short to spend it dodging truth, and blaming others is the most effective way to delay truth. When you're with someone who plays the blame game, it poisons every conflict. You try to have a calm discussion, but they twist it. You bring up your needs. They turn it into your flaws. Every issue becomes a courtroom where you're always on trial. No matter how gently you speak, how clearly you communicate, the verdict is always the same: guilty. This pattern is more than frustrating. It's emotionally abusive because it erodes your sense of reality. It creates confusion where there should be clarity. And over time, you begin to silence yourself just to avoid being misunderstood, misquoted, or attacked. Take a lesson from Viktor Frankl. Though not a Stoic by title, his insights deeply align with Stoic practice. He said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. The blame game removes that space. It replaces choice with reaction, but the wise person reclaims that space, not by arguing, but by detaching." So what do you do when someone keeps blaming you for their storms? First, you stop arguing. You stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Second, you return to what's true. Ask, am I truly responsible for this? Or am I being made responsible for someone else's emotions? The Stoic path is not passive, it's fiercely clear. Seneca wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance." Wisdom requires that you see when blame is not feedback. It's a weapon. And once you see it, you don't absorb it. You name it. You step away from it. You refuse to carry what isn't yours. Real love involves accountability on both sides. But when one person always wears the victim's crown, there's no room for mutual growth. There's only imbalance, and imbalance, when ignored, becomes injury. So the next time someone tells you, "You always ruin everything," pause, ask yourself, is that a mirror or a manipulation? Because the truth is, the more someone avoids responsibility, the more they will try to assign it to the nearest person who cares. Don't let that person be you. You deserve a relationship where responsibility is shared, not shifted. Blame without introspection is noise, and your peace is too valuable to be polluted by someone else's refusal to grow. Number 7, social isolation. It doesn't happen all at once. First, they question your friends. "I don't think they're good for you." Then they raise doubts about your family. "They don't really understand us." Gradually, they convince you that your support system is flawed, dangerous, or disloyal, and before you know it, you're alone, cut off, cornered, and emotionally dependent on them. Social isolation is a manipulation tactic as old as human insecurity. It works because it's subtle. It wears the mask of love and concern, but its goal is power through loneliness. The fewer people you trust, the easier you are to control. The more disconnected you become, the more they can shape your world, your truth, and even your identity. The Stoics were clear about relationships, Epictetus said. The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best. That includes friends, family, and even yourself. If someone pushes you to sever those ties without clear reason, especially when it benefits their control over your mind, that's not wisdom, that's domination. And it's not always hostile. Sometimes it sounds like care. I just want to be your safe space. You don't need anyone else but me. At first, those words feel romantic, but later they become a cage, because true safety doesn't isolate. It integrates. Real love connects you more deeply to life, not less. Now consider the story of Frida Kahlo. Despite severe health struggles and a tumultuous relationship, she clung fiercely to her identity and the people who knew her before fame, before pain. Her art, her friendships, and her roots were her lifeline. She didn't allow anyone to become her entire world. And that's a lesson we all need. When someone tries to become your world, they usually want to replace yours with theirs. The danger with isolation is that it distorts your perception. Without external voices, you begin to doubt your own. You forget how to check reality. You lose the mirror of honest friendships. And worst of all, you start to feel like your disconnection is your own doing. But Stoicism calls you back to autonomy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, and your thoughts are shaped by your environment. If someone manipulates your environment by removing people, distorting your reality, or creating emotional dependency, they're not protecting you, they're possessing you." So how do you respond? First, observe the pattern. Have your connections dwindled since the relationship began? Do you feel nervous reaching out to people you once trusted? Do you find yourself defending your isolation, even though you miss being seen? Second, test the reaction. When you make plans, does your partner encourage your joy or guilt trip your independence? If your growth threatens them, your relationship is not a partnership, it's a prison. The Stoic answer is not emotional rebellion, it's clarity. Seneca taught, associate with people who are likely to improve you. That includes protecting your right to choose who those people are. No one, not a lover, a friend, or a teacher, should decide for you who is safe and who isn't. That power belongs to your reason, not their approval. So the next time someone says, they don't care about you like I do, remember, anyone who truly loves you will never ask you to abandon those who made you who you are. Real love doesn't sever, it supports. Because in the end, connection is strength. And someone who fears your connection to others is someone who fears losing control. Don't isolate, reconnect. Remember who you were before the cage was built. That's the Stoic way. To return to what's true and to never let fear dress itself as devotion. Number 8, subtle sabotage. They don't scream, they don't threaten. They smile when you succeed. But something in their tone makes you second guess it. They offer compliments with a sharp edge. You're finally doing something productive for once. Or they plant seeds of doubt cloaked in concern. Are you sure you can handle that promotion? It sounds like a lot. This is subtle sabotage, emotional undermining that comes not through conflict, but through corrosion. It's dangerous because it hides behind love, behind support, behind familiarity. But its impact is no less harmful. It erodes your confidence slowly, one disguised comment at a time. The person doing it may not even admit it to themselves. Their jealousy is silent, but their patterns are loud. Stoicism warns us to pay attention to the intentions behind actions. Epictetus wrote, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." When someone consistently makes you question your joy, your achievements, or your next step, examine not just their words, but the feeling their words leave behind. The saboteur may call it honesty, They may even say they're just looking out for you. But real care doesn't create self-doubt. It creates self-trust. If every conversation with someone leaves you more uncertain than empowered, that's not care. That's control through corrosion. Now look at the life of Toni Morrison, a Nobel Prize-winning author who faced critics, doubters, and gatekeepers her entire career. She once said, "If you want to fly, you have to give up the things that weigh you down." She saw it, named it, protected her mind from it, and moved forward anyway. That is Stoic resilience in action. Naming the weight before it becomes permanent. And subtle sabotage often comes from people closest to us. Friends, partners, even family. People who feel threatened by your growth because it reminds them of what they haven't done. And rather than confront their own stagnation, they chip away at your motion. So how do you respond? First, get honest about the pattern. Does their support come with hesitation? Are their compliments always half praise, half jab? Do you feel smaller after being around them? The Stoics remind us that clarity is the foundation of peace. If something feels off, it probably is. Second, don't fight fire with fire. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Don't retaliate. Don't mirror their pettiness. Rise by staying rooted. Keep your goals aligned with reason, not resentment, and let your peace do the talking. And third, limit your exposure. Not all saboteurs need confrontation, some just need silence. And for you to stop explaining your vision to those committed to misunderstanding it, the Stoic approach isn't about endless debates, it's about guarding your energy. If someone drains you, even silently, they do not deserve front row seats in your life. Seneca said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Not people who quietly compete with you. Not people who belittle your momentum while smiling to your face. Real love wants to see you rise, even if it challenges them to rise too." So the next time someone says, "Don't get your hopes up," ask yourself, why not? What's their fear in seeing you believe in yourself? The truth is, subtle sabotage doesn't block your path. It slows your pace. But if you stay vigilant, grounded in Stoic clarity, no whisper of doubt can stop the voice of purpose. And the most powerful thing you can do in the face of sabotage is this: succeed anyway, calmly, quietly, decisively. Let your life become the proof that no amount of disguised envy can derail what is rooted in reason. Number 9, inability to apologize. It's a small phrase, "I'm sorry," but for some, it's the hardest truth to speak. Not because they never make mistakes, but because admitting those mistakes feels like death to their ego. So instead, they deflect, they deny, they distract. They rewrite history to make themselves the victim. And you, the one asking for accountability, become the enemy. This is not about perfection. Everyone falters. But when someone refuses to apologize, habitually, strategically, it reveals something deeper. Not just pride, but power. To them, saying "I was wrong" feels like giving up control. And so, even in the face of obvious hurt, they remain silent. Or worse, they blame you for how you interpreted their behavior. The Stoics taught that ego is the enemy of growth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. It is the truth I'm after, not my own ego." This is the posture of the wise, a willingness to be corrected, a quiet strength that sees apology not as weakness, but as clarity. When someone can't apologize, they force you into emotional labor. You do the healing for both of you. You justify their actions to preserve the peace. You internalize their neglect as your overreaction. Over time, this dynamic damages more than just trust. It fractures your self-respect. Consider the example of Maya Angelou. She spoke often of how people show you who they are. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. A person's refusal to apologize is not a mistake. It's a revelation. They are showing you how they handle responsibility, how they process accountability, how they deal with harm. And the lesson is not to teach them how to change. The lesson is to believe them. The inability to apologize also signals emotional immaturity, because it's not just about admitting fault. It's about acknowledging the emotional reality of another person. When someone refuses to say, "I'm sorry," what they're really saying is, "Your pain doesn't matter as much as my pride." And that is not love, that is hierarchy. The Stoics invite us to seek what is true over what is flattering. Epictetus taught, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." Likewise, it is impossible for a person to heal what they refuse to see. Without apology, there is no repair. Without repair, there is no respect. So what do you do when you're dealing with someone who refuses to apologize? First, stop chasing the apology. You cannot force humility into someone who worships image over integrity. Second, grieve the connection honestly, because when someone can't acknowledge your hurt, they're telling you they're not safe with your heart. And third, protect your boundaries, not with anger, but with clarity. You don't need to yell to make a point. You just need to leave the conversation when it becomes circular. The Stoic way is not to win arguments. It is to preserve truth and peace. Apology is not just a word, it's a bridge. And if someone refuses to build it, they're choosing separation over connection. So the next time someone says, "I didn't mean to hurt you," but can't say, "I'm sorry I did," ask yourself, is this humility or is this evasion? Because the truth is, a person who cannot apologize is a person who cannot truly connect. And the longer you wait for that apology, the more time you spend standing at the edge of a bridge they never intended to build. Walk back, return to solid ground. That's where your peace lives. Number 10, constant comparison. You're not like my ex. Why can't you be more like them? They handled things better than you do. These aren't casual remarks. They're tiny arrows aimed at your self-worth. Repeated enough, they pierce your confidence and make you question your uniqueness. Constant comparison is not just unkind, it's a slow form of emotional erosion. In a healthy relationship, comparison has no place, because true love sees the person in front of them, not the ghost of someone before or the shadow of someone else's highlight reel. Yet some people use comparison as a weapon, not to uplift, but to diminish, not to inspire, but to control. The Stoics would see this clearly for what it is. Marcus Aurelius warned, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." And when someone compares you constantly, they're usually not seeing you. They're seeing an idealized version of someone else. They're projecting a fantasy, and your reality, no matter how present, becomes invisible. But here's the deeper danger. Constant comparison doesn't just change how they see you. It changes how you see yourself. You start editing your behavior to meet an invisible standard. You measure your worth against someone who isn't even in the room, and slowly your authenticity begins to erode. This is where Stoic clarity becomes your shield, Epictetus reminded us. Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly. If someone constantly makes you feel like who you are is not enough, it's not feedback. It's judgment, and judgment, when repeated, becomes conditioning. Now look at Eleanor Roosevelt, a woman constantly judged, compared, and underestimated. Yet she once said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." She refused to be measured by anyone else's ruler, and that's your power too. The ability to decide whose voice you allow into your identity. When someone compares you to others, it says more about their unhealed expectations than it does about your actual value. It reveals their insecurity, their unresolved nostalgia, or their fantasy of control. It is not your job to meet their expectations. It is your duty to remain rooted in your own values. So what do you do when you're caught in this cycle? First, notice how you feel after these comparisons. Do you feel uplifted or diminished? Do you feel seen or replaced? The Stoic way is not to react emotionally, but to interpret clearly. Second, set the boundary. Calmly say, I am not that person, and I don't need to be. You don't have to prove your worth by outperforming someone else's memory. You only have to embody your truth. That's where real confidence comes from. Not from comparison, but from alignment. And finally, protect your inner dialogue. Because even after the conversation ends, the comparison can echo in your mind. When that happens, return to reason, return to clarity. Ask yourself, is this who I am or who someone else wants me to be? Seneca wrote, the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, wasting today by focusing on tomorrow. And that's what comparison does. It pulls you out of the present and into a hypothetical world where someone else is always better. But your peace is not hypothetical. It's real. It's rooted in now. So the next time someone says, they were better at this than you, remember, you're not here to compete with ghosts. You're here to become whole. And wholeness begins the moment you stop shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's broken lens. Because the person meant for you will never ask you to become someone else. They'll meet you where you are and walk forward with you from there. Number 11, constant victimhood. Everyone struggles. Life wounds us all in some way. But there's a line between processing pain and living in it as an identity. When someone constantly positions themselves as the victim, no matter the situation, it becomes less about healing and more about control. They wield their suffering like a shield and a sword, and anyone who challenges their narrative becomes the villain. At first, it might look like vulnerability. They open up about how others have wronged them. They share the weight of their story. But over time, you begin to notice a pattern. They are always the injured party. Every friend betrayed them. Every job mistreated them. Every partner abandoned them. And soon, if you're not careful, your name joins the list. The Stoics didn't deny pain. They faced it head on, but they refused to let it become their identity. Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Constant victimhood is a refusal to take that second step. It's a commitment to pain without responsibility, and that creates a vortex where nothing ever changes, except the people they blame. The danger of being in a relationship with a perpetual victim is that it slowly erodes your sense of fairness. You begin carrying emotional weight that isn't yours. You walk on eggshells not because you've done harm, but because you fear triggering theirs. And in time, your role shifts from partner to caretaker, from equal to emotional sponge. Let's take a lesson from James Baldwin. He said, you think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read, he understood that pain is not a pass, it is a portal into depth, not dependence. The people who grow through their pain develop presence. The ones who refuse to grow build patterns that keep them powerless and keep you entangled. What's worse, constant victimhood weaponizes empathy. When you express your needs, they collapse. When you hold a boundary, they accuse you of being cold. And because you care, you back down, not because you were wrong, but because you were guilted into silence. Stoicism teaches us to love with clarity, not blind compassion, Marcus Aurelius wrote. The best way to avenge yourself is to not be like that. When someone uses their pain to avoid growth, your job isn't to rescue them. Your job is to remain centered in truth. So what do you do? First, recognize the difference between pain and pattern. Everyone gets hurt, but not everyone builds an identity around that hurt. If their story never changes, if every conversation loops back to what the world owes them, that's not processing, it's programming. Second, stop overcompensating. You cannot heal someone who uses their wounds to manipulate. You can be kind, You can be steady, but you must stay honest. And third, speak the truth. Gently but directly. Say, I see your pain, but I also see your power, and I can't keep pretending you have none. Some people may lash out at that honesty, but others, if they're ready, will hear the invitation in it. Seneca said, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. But the friction must lead somewhere. Growth, humility, courage. If someone refuses to let their trials shape them, and instead uses them to shape you, step back. Because in the end, love does not mean sacrificing your peace at the altar of someone else's narrative. You are not cruel for protecting your energy. You are wise. And the moment you stop participating in their self-pity play, you make room for your own strength to rise. Number 12. Intermittent interest. They disappear for days. Then suddenly they're overflowing with affection. They ignore your texts. Then love bomb you out of nowhere. They don't ask how you're doing, but when they need something, they're all ears. This isn't love. This isn't connection. This is intermittent interest. And it's one of the most confusing, destabilizing emotional experiences a person can endure. At its core, intermittent interest is about control through unpredictability. It creates a cycle of hope and disappointment, attention and absence, closeness and coldness. And if you're not careful, you begin to wait for scraps, mistaking them for care. You tell yourself, maybe they're just busy. Maybe I'm overreacting. But the truth is, consistency is never confusing. Only manipulation is. Stoicism teaches us to look past appearances, to question motives, patterns, and what truly serves peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And when you constantly think about someone who treats you like an option, you begin to feel like one. You start tying your self-worth to their attention. You begin to crave their affection like a reward, not realizing you become conditioned by their inconsistency. This is what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, a tactic used not just in human relationships, but in addiction studies. The reward comes unpredictably, so the craving grows stronger. You don't bond through love. You bond through anxiety, through uncertainty, through hoping today will be better. And this kind of bond isn't soulful, it's survival-based. Look at someone like Alanis Morissette. Her lyrics in You Ought to Know captured the pain of being treated as disposable, as an afterthought. But what did she do with that pain? She turned it into clarity, into art, into power. That's the Stoic way. Not to suppress hurt, but to refine it into something honest and whole. The danger of intermittent interest is that it trains you to lower your standards. You start accepting the bare minimum, a call once a week, a last-minute message, a vague promise, but what you allow becomes your norm. And the Stoics warned against drifting into mediocrity. Seneca wrote, he who is everywhere is nowhere. If someone shows up only when it's convenient, they are nowhere when it matters. So how do you protect yourself from this pattern? First, get honest about the rhythm. Are you always the one initiating? Does their affection only appear when they want something? Do you feel secure or strung along? Second, don't chase. When you pull away and they suddenly show interest, that's not love. It's ego. They don't miss you, they miss control, and your attention feeds it. Third, set the standard, not with ultimatums, but with energy. You stop rewarding inconsistency with emotional access. You don't match their silence with pleas. You match it with presence, with stillness, with self-respect. Epictetus taught, you are a fool if you want your children and wife and friends to live forever, and it makes you unhappy if they don't. He wasn't being cruel. He was teaching detachment from illusion. And intermittent interest is an illusion. It mimics love, but doesn't carry its weight. So the next time someone says, I've just been so busy, Ask yourself, are they overwhelmed or are they uninvested? Because people make time for what they value, and if you're always the one waiting, wondering, initiating, that's your answer. Remember this, real connection is not loud, but it is consistent. It doesn't disappear and reappear like a signal. It stays. And if someone can't meet you with presence, you're allowed to meet yourself with peace. Because you don't need someone who shows up only when they feel like it. You need someone who chooses to stay when it matters most. These 12 toxic behaviors are not just signs of dysfunction. They are signals that your peace, your clarity, and your self-respect are under quiet attack. And the Stoic doesn't ignore signals. He studies them. He uses them to sharpen boundaries, not bend them. You're not cold for protecting your spirit. You're not cruel for requiring consistency. You are wise for walking away from confusion and choosing stillness. Remember what Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And to master yourself, you must first stop allowing chaos to master your space. So if this video helped bring that clarity, like it, share it, and subscribe for more Stoic truth spoken plainly, because peace isn't given, it's practiced, one choice at a time.